ferita ye Hini nomuya ye Hini ferita ye Afu kunanga Afrika ferita ye Hini no muya ye Hini ferita ye Afu kunanga Afrika 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 ye Afo kunanga Africa ferita ye kunanga Afrika ni numuya ye kunanga Afrika ni ferita ye kunanga Afrika.
tribute to Suleiman Sise, who passed on in February, in yeah, February this year. So I thought that it was so necessary to rethink the memory of African cinema, and we've done most of us. And then for me, I was born in Zimbabwe. I always say to those people that I was born in a white supremacist African country called Rhodesia. It's because I lived that experience. The reason I came here because my father was in exile for 7 years of when I was born. Around me, we experienced a lot of, we had writers, we had prison, we had potential filmmakers who were frequently making decisions about how to tell stories to a continent that was largely illiterate. There were stories about Mozambique, for example, documented in Mozambique at the time of the liberation of Mozambique in 1975, when Samora Machel was suggesting that we needed to consider to tell stories through film. Cinema and liberation is about the reaction to those people who are either are still alive, some of them, most of them have gone, of course, and then to talk about this work, about what has happened, with Pedro Pimenta, who authored it here, with John, say what can we do, what can we propose, and we spoke, me and Billy talked about his work that when we screened this film Mario last year here at the Film Africa, I started really running around with so many ideas. How do we put these things together? Knowing John's memory about work, about how we explain to people about the moment that we are in, and also Billy's work about, the short film, for example, that I found myself about memory of St. Usman from there. That's why I wanted this guy to come and have a fireside discussion between them and to talk about their kind of varied experiences. I mean, it's not kind of, I'm not restricting this kind of in any form or when that's why it's all over the place, because it requires this kind of response to, we start with Billy, showing his film, for example, some of his films, this is what is his choice, and then if John responds to that, it was just kind of like a discussion between two people who I respect very much in different ways, and I think that it's so important. I'm glad that you guys came today. Yeah, that's what I can say, and I should invite Billy and John to come on stage. It's okay. So, we to start by screening the film. Yeah. Lovely to be here. Thank you. If you don't mind, I'm going to go back down because I want to see.
Mademoiselle Marseille m'a donné rendez-vous pour sortir avec elle. Mais je ne sais pas où la chercher, la chercher. Il me faut la chercher. Oh, ouais. La trouver, la trouver. Je dois la retrouver. Oh, papa, je vais voir ces gens. Et dans le quartier du palier, j'interroge les gens pour savoir où elle est. On me dit qu'on l'a vue vendre des limaçons. J'ai beaucoup aimé rue, j'entends pas sa chanson. En famille, c'est ma scie, pour de ses escouteurs. En famille, c'est ma scie, vers ça qui s'espère. Remontant Canebière, j'ai le cœur qui s'emballe. Oh non, est plus hier, au palais de cristal. Mauvaise limonade, y'a plus que des musées, que des belles façades, mais il faut s'amuser. Enfin la belle affaire, il faut chercher partout, des collines à la mer, ça fait des sacrés goûts, des calanques à la nette, c'est une histoire de fou, ça fait des kilomètres.
Wow. Okay. Really, I'm kind of stunned by all of that. So much went through my mind watching that. Know where to start. Well, okay, let's start with our friend Alan Nakula, whose work is dedicated to. In a way, his work, the work of many photographers that I admired in the 80s, led me to a thought which I've been sort of developing since. And that thought applies more directly to your first piece than anything else. And the thought is this, that essentially we need to think about the photograph and the photographic image as a kind of utopian document. Because in a way, behind every image is a sort of promise, a kind of promissory note to the future. All images, by implication, reach us after the fact of their construction. So what the image says, in effect, is I am consenting to be made now because at some moment in the future, you will be there to meet me. What a great thing. What a fantastic gesture. And I was struck very forcefully by that, looking at the very first piece. Can you say something about the first piece? Do you mind? Because I'm so struck by that. No, what happened is I had made this second one before, and I was visiting a museum called Resistance and Liberation in Lisbon. And I was visiting because I was researching this project of the And on the fourth floor of that museum is an installation and work devoted to the anti-colonial struggle in the former African colonies against Portugal. And in that collection, they had a number of photographic books. And when I saw that one, I didn't read the caption, but I was struck by it. But I thought it was from, I thought I found an image of slavery in ink. And then I read the caption and I realized it was from 1907. That it was equally important because it had to do with the pacification of the territories that Portugal claimed during the division in 1895 in Berlin. But you couldn't just claim places, you need to be able to secure it, you needed to establish the borders, you needed to have the cooperation to subdue the population and have them accept your presence there. So seeing that, I thought, oh well, I would like to make something about this image, just being struck by the image. So the first part of it, in a way, is doing that. But one thing I realized, and me and my colleague, my editor, Luis Nunez, and I learned this with Alan Sekula and others, that, okay, yes, we can recompose, we can deconstruct, we can fragment, we can reframe, we can use images, but we might want to be aware and cognizant of the fact that we're doing that and that we're giving another meaning to it, and that if we're honest, we should allow the original image to exist and appear, and then let others make their own evaluation and reading of the original image. So we do that business in the beginning with the moving and this thing, but then at the end we give you the full image that it came from with the rip and all this thing. So it's more, maybe more honest and more useful for others to take in the entire image themselves and evaluate what we've done with it, right? Because what we did was subjective. And it's an old thing. I was remembering Ernst Fischer's book, The Necessity of Art. And one thing I remember from the book is that art is expressive and it communicates. Expression is not always. It's not the communication of anything objective. It's our working with it and our thing. And that's valuable. It can affect and move people and give insight and this kind of thing. But it's one aspect. Do we want to communicate something? It's maybe more prosaic, right? But it gives the more maybe information for the viewer to evaluate for themselves. So trying to have the two. And we do something similar. We had maybe done it first in the Marseille, because the second part is giving you the image in full, right? It gives you with some interesting and bouncy and moving, music, but it gives you the image in full, because that first part is interpretation, is subjective, is blurring, slowing down, is changing, in fact. And I hope you're interested by that, but it's not
really the thing. So if we give you the full thing, you have both. So I think that was it. And I like what you say. I think images can be a kind of promise because they're not exhausted, right, by the moment that they're made. And if they survive, they persist. Others can react to them with 100 years between the making and the seeing. And you've seen a lot of images, but maybe this one means for you. So
No, but
I accept it.
It has the reason I'm struck by that, and it leads to the second project in a way, was that, you have the full image, and the full image says one thing. It establishes a kind of mise en scène of oppression.
Yeah.
Something happened. But when you go closer, something else emerges, which is that there's a kind of dramaturgy of secrecy
Yes.
embedded there
Yes.
in all their faces, whether it's a grim determination to punish or to accept, or, there's a kind of series of embedded secrets that the image holds, almost as if it's saying, when you come closer, this is what you will see.
Yeah.
But you need to come this close before you see that I absolutely hate this moment, or that, you know what, I don't really care. I mean, that guy holding his chin, he's like, fuck you. Wherever you are in the future, fuck you. There's a kind of braggadocio and insouciance in his gesture, which isn't there with all the others. But all of these are there. They're there for us to see later, which is what I loved about.
I think it's that's interesting because, okay, I was aware when I was making it, and if I was not, I was reminded by a lot of friends and colleagues and former students about gaze, the nature of the gaze, the power of the gaze, the colonial gaze, blah, blah, blah. And then I realized you can have the complicity, you can have the, what do you say, you can have the returning the gaze. And I was more interested, it's not pure, it's not, the power is not absolute, okay? If they move, they blur, they make a problem for the photographer. So it's not, I don't believe in the absolute power of the one with the machine. And I wanted to somehow break that. So in a way, the moving allows, and also to see them, moving along them and see them. The other thing that happens for me in that image is this, it foreshadows the latest story in the story of the struggles and resistance and liberation in Africa, because we know that at a certain point those with the guns lorded over and helped to keep control of the others. And it's present in that picture. It's one white guy, he's a lieutenant. Later he becomes a colonel or a general because he pacifies Guinea-Bissau, but in 1915. And he was in other theaters. 1908, he was in another place, and there's actually photographs of that. But I thought it's a very important image to share with others. It existed in a photographic album in an archive. Only so many people see it, but if I can make something that makes it available to you, without your traveling there and seeking it out and that thing, maybe that simple thing is helpful. I share it with others, and you can evaluate for yourself. You can disagree with my interpretation. But I think, yeah, and I think the interesting thing about that, I saw that man with his hand like this. I found in photographs that I use, it's actually film footage I found that I use in Mario. There's a small boy who has the same gesture. There's another man among the peoples of the northern part after the massacre of 1961, a group of men together. The others, they have the same gesture. So I found that interesting. And
Never seen it.
that's
Never seen it.
yeah.
I mean, I've spent the last 30 years going through an archive of images from the Congo, the Royal African Museum
Yes.
in Belgium. So I don't know how many I've got now and how many films I've used them in. Possibly 7 films over the last 20 years, and maybe about 1,000 images. I've never seen that gesture. You know,
Maybe it belongs to that area and those people. I mean, they have this image of the thinker, you know, and there's sculptures of it. And I felt about buy one when I was at a roadside place in Angola. I'm still kicking myself. They have this image of the thinker, and when I approached, the man says, I said, yeah, I know. And so some things you find, and maybe we find that in a photograph. We might ignore it if we saw it in a. But I'm glad you recognize it. And different, in a way, it becomes possible to see them as to individuate in a way, and then to recombine them. So I think that's, I think that's interesting. But the fact that they have different reactions to the camera. The idea that they never saw a camera, they don't know what to do, this kind of thing. And no. Also, I found other photographs that I didn't use, a group, similar group photo, but the people are not bound or chained. They're there in a group, but they're older. These are warriors. They're of age that they don't cooperate. Huh? So that's why they must be subdued. I will show the opening of Mario a bit later, if that's okay. And maybe that will strike you. It will be interesting if you remember these people. You didn't see so much of them. You didn't see them in action, see them moving, see them from a distance. So maybe it's unfair. But I will share it with you, and I will explain why I share it.
I just want to say something about the second piece that you showed us, but in a way via homily. I haven't seen Billy since 1989. I went to Carl Arts to do a residency, the California Institute of Arts, where Billy taught. And I had many friends there, including him. We haven't seen each other since then. We've know of each other. We've been aware of each other over the decades, in part because of a singular figure. Yeah, there's a sort of spirit of solidarity that we've had, engineered largely, I would say. Many would argue otherwise, but engineered largely by the figure who is the subject of your second project that you showed us, Ousmane Sembène. Sembène's footprint, Sembène's DNA is virtually in all of us, I think. Yeah. And it's one of the reasons why we're sitting here today. But I suspect, like all DNA, the way in which it appears in your being is slightly different to mine. So can I ask you something about Sembène and why the interest in him?
Maybe because he was the person that many of us saw first, the person that he was an example of a kind of possibility. He was, he sort of gave permission that you could find your own way, and that you should, and that you don't have to wait, you can make something, okay? And the fact that we could read his books, we could, on occasion, we could see him. I remember seeing him in about 1975, 76 at Howard University because Haile had brought him, and he invited a number of us to come to this communications conference they used to have at Howard University every year. So we got to be in a hotel room with him and Paul Vieira and Pauline Vieira, his companion and friend, and listen to him, talk with him, ask questions, this kind of thing. And that was good. I saw him, maybe I saw him in Los Angeles or something like that at UCLA. But he was always a figure. And then over the years, okay, with any kind of figure like that, who says the father of African cinema and this thing, at a certain point, the next generation gets fed up with that, and they start to ask questions and say things. But I think, like Haile and many others, I don't accept this talk from them. And maybe I'm more gentle in spirit, so I try to sit with them and ask, like, why do you say that? And they say, oh, because he doesn't share with us, he doesn't talk, because he, and I said, but he never treats us like that. And they say, yeah, because you're not a problem, you're not a competition, he's nice with you, you know. But I thought, but he's nice with you. But they were on this thing. But I always tried to reason with them. Haile is less indulgent. He's more harsh when they talk like that. And I think, and also how he came to be, how he made himself, his story. Because it was not a given that he would write books or he would make films or any of those things. And I noticed another thing maybe that I noticed about him is he was in fact very close to the next generation of African leaders, especially in the former Portuguese colonies, because he's born in an area that is close to Guinea-Bissau. Casamance? Yeah. And he spoke Guinean Creole. And he was with them often. He was with Mario Pinto de Andrade and Viriato de Cruz and Marcelino dos Santos traveling in China in 1958. I have photos of him that I found in Mario's archive. That's in the movie Mario. And I realized he was closer to them than he was to the Mr. Senghor and the rest. In age and in temperament, he was closer to them. I have a picture of all of them with Nikita Khrushchev, which you probably couldn't have. It's in Mario. And So I learned more about him. Also, maybe to be subjective, if not to be too indulgent. My own path when I started, okay, is, and I say this because I was speaking with Haile on Sunday, and he reminded us that the context when I came along is, I started studying and thinking about cinema in the early 70s, 73, 74. And that's the world after 1968. That's the world after not only Paris, but the Tet Offensive and Vietnam and all this kind of thing. And a lot of radical ideas and things were happening. It was a dynamic in the culture, right? And also it's after the civil rights movement has achieved its major legislative goals in this thing, and then something more radical develops by the impatient young and the impatient people of the urban parts of the United States. So it's a more radical response to the existing conditions and more radical demands in a way. And so you come in that context, and there are all kind of initiatives and proposals, huh? About what we can do, what we should do, this kind of thing. But in my own case, I think when I was interested in the cinema and in movies, and I thought movies could be a way to make social and political intervention, a way to do something useful that you could justify to the real militants who were doing the hard work that you were contributing, right? And I saw that in the Cuban cinema, and that's why I believe, oh, this can be useful and justified, you know what I mean? And so it was that. The other thing was, maybe my path was, it was a time when people were asking intellectually different questions, and they were seeking out older, more suppressed in that country, because the story of the left, the radical left, the Marxist left, the communist left, was suppressed. In the universities, you didn't read Capital. If you meet American people and you start to talk to them about these things, believe me, until the late 1970s, they didn't read Marx in school. It was not allowed. There was one Marxist professor of economics in the United States, and that was Paul Baran, and he was at Stanford, okay? And then later, now they talk about Kamala's father. He studied with Baran and those people, right? And then he was a tenured professor, and then he was, as my Jamaican friend says, Marxist light. No disrespect, huh? But I'm just telling you, because I met a scholar. I remember Dick Hebdige. I met Dick Hebdige, and he was teaching at CalArts, and I said, Dick, you keep speaking to them about Gramsci and these things. They didn't read it, Dick. Oh, but they know. Dick, they don't know that. They didn't read it. Okay? I'm the same age. I know they didn't read it. Okay, but for me, this recovery of this period, of the politics and the movement that was very strong in the 1930s. It's older than that, but in the 1930s. You remember John Reed and Reds and all that thing? Well, that was suppressed in the universities and in the schools, but in the world it lived. Bookstores, old ones who can whisper some things to you. But so it's two paths. I was one of the ones who had the benefit of not being simply obsessed with my own specific group, the Black consciousness and the Black political, the cultural thing and the expression and all this thing. Yes, I had to be aware, and I wanted to engage with that, but I wanted the other part of the story. I wanted the story that connected to the larger and older project. And so I was learning both things at once. And it marks me. I'm only saying that to you because it marks me. It's my interest, whatever I'm able to do, it's a part of it. And that's it, I confess.
Well, you're making a confession that I think the film on
And
Marseille,
that connects to Simbin.
yes, no, absolutely. That's just what I was going to try and tease out, because in a way it's a confession the film makes on behalf of Sembène as well. I'm very lucky to have met him several times. I think the last time was at Keith Sheary's house for dinner, when we invited him here for a fellowship, the BFI fellowship. And he came for that. And the Semben you encountered then, what year was that, Keith? Can you remember? 2005. So the Semben I encountered in 2005, actually, no, the last time was in NYU for Manchia Diawara's conference 2 years later. But the Semben then and the Semben that I met in 1987 for the first time at the Hotel Independence in Ouaga for FESPACO were different but the same. There was an illusion of Africanity that he wore as a mask really well. You know, when you saw him, you just saw this grand old man of African cinema. You almost felt like he'd never left the continent, right? That he was a kind of griot who was embodies African knowledge and his totality, blah, 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 blah. But of course, this film shows you a completely different side of that figure. That in fact, this carefully cultivated mask of Africanity actually hides a whole set of other formations, psychic, ideological, geographic. It lived in multiple spaces before I encounter him. Before he adopts the mask of Africanity, he had been all sorts of other things. You know, not simply occupationally, but also just politically. You know, a union activist, a member of the CP, you know, a shop steward, blah, blah, blah. All the rest of it. Before the writer, before the decision to go to VGIK to be a filmmaker. So, you know, I'm very grateful for you for removing the mask a bit, just so that people get a sense of the complexity of the figure. Was that one of the ambitions behind this, do you think?
No, I don't think, to be honest,
Okay.
I think it was just to speak about this earlier phase and period of the thing, you know, of his life and his work and his thing, and to remind people. I mean, if they remind them, if they knew, if not, to at least allow that they can know that and think about what they will, and it just enriches the story. I think his being, what do you say, his role in Africa and his presentation, and I think was maybe always a bit important for him. I don't disagree, but I think what you say is right. Maybe if people didn't know that, and he was not presenting that, maybe at a later stage in his life, was focused on something else. I'm happy, but no, I was not trying to.
Unmask him.
No, because then he would be banned in the U.S., and if you said his name, you would get defunded and that kind of thing. I don't want to do that. But it's good. It's good to be maybe reminded of the extent of his journey. The other thing is, you see, Semben could sometimes function as he could assume the role of a journalist, and there are wonderful photos of him meeting Ho Chi Minh and him making an interview with Ho Chi Minh. And it's in that movie about Semben, the documentary movie, you can see.
Samba's film.
Yeah, and what happened is, in fact, the workers in Marseille, the port of Marseille, they refused to ship weapons to the war in Indochina. So, I mean, he had credibility, this kind of thing. But it was, yeah, and I support that.
I mean, the broader project that we were asked to speak about, I can mention something and then we'll see where we go with it. But I can only speak about it in autobiographical terms. You know, the first time I realized, properly realized, that there was this other dimension to cinema, this engaged dimension. You know, because let's face it, you know, when you're a kid growing up in England in the 80s, 70s and 80s, you're not really thinking African liberation. You're thinking maybe black liberation here, but Africa is a bit far. But I remember going to Cairo for the film festival there in 87, I think, 88, something like that. Anyway, it was after Testament had been made.
Yes.
And I took this film to Cairo. And of course, in my head, I'd made this film about an exilic figure from Ghana who'd left after the coup of 66 and lots of mentions of Nkrumah. But I wasn't thinking Ghana. I was thinking here, you know, my experience of living this life as an exilic figure with a mom who had something, you know, I wasn't thinking there. I was thinking, until I got to Cairo. And the film was shown, and a trade union, a leftist trade union, demanded that I brought the film to show them in the hall that they owned in downtown Cairo. So I took the film, took Testament, and I got there in 2,000, maybe more, I don't know how many. And they spoke in Arabic and introduced me, but the word Nkrumah kept coming up over and over and over again. And at some point, the penny dropped. I thought, shit, of course. Because Nkrumah had been married to an Egyptian. I mean, I'd completely forgotten that. And so the sense of ownership that they had of this man was complete and absolute, irrespective of my film. So the film was there merely to continue an ongoing dialogue about Africa and liberation and cultural struggle. Blah, 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 blah. And that's what happened. They showed the film. They lectured me about what I'd got wrong. Of course, this is something we're used to, right? You show the film and people, militants in our midst, take it and they take what they can from it. On the whole, usually 30%. The other 70% they reject. They give you a lecture about how, but in the process, a conversation starts, right? Which is combative, collaborative, almost always militant, but not necessarily, about how images and how the cinema participates in this struggle for emancipation and self-emancipation. And I'd never forgotten that. You know, it was my first encounter with that thing that we then called cinema after the fact, but I didn't know it before that. You know, I just knew it as a theoretical thing. I didn't realize that when we say cinema, that's what we meant. It wasn't just the making of the fucking thing. It was the whole ensemble of relations, as Gramsci used to say. That connected all these things together. People, product, image, narrative, story, etc., etc., etc.
It's wonderful. I'm glad you made that film. I was impressed. And I was impressed with the first films of all of you. But I have to say, even myself, you know, because, okay, I read, I knew about what happened in Ghana, I thought. And then over the years, like 2 years ago, I was reading Sue Williams's book about Congo and about Lumumba. And my appreciation for Mr. Nkrumah went up 200%. When I revisited that and I understood his efforts on behalf of the Congo and Lumumba to support him, and the difficulty he faced in doing that, and the extent of the hostility and difficulty in doing that, my admiration for him just exceeded everything I could think of. Also I started to learn about, because I was curious about this, African American people who were in Ghana at the time, and they were invited, and a number of them. And so I was anxious to learn a lot more about that. Then I learned about the Ghanaian television. And recently I saw something that you should be aware of. Some people have been delving into and finding the archival material from the film board in Ghana. And they start to try to restore and recover those things, you know. And probably there's interesting and worthwhile things to have and to know. But you've got a good introduction to, to that world with 2,000 of them. Trade unionists yelling at you.
I did.
That's sobering. Also, you know, Lumumba's widow and his children, they were invited to Congo. It's how they survived. And it's where they lived, I think, especially the daughter for a long time. It's where Raoul Peck met her to get the material that he used in Death of a Prophet, you know. So, yeah.
Lumumba is, I mean, I think in part the reasons why you go, at some point you understand why you're doing what you do. And in my case, that's bound with certain moments that I'm just not reconciled with. So I return to them again and again and again and again. And one of them has to do with the death of Lumumba and exactly what happened. And Sue's book is great, but it's still just, you read it and you go, okay, so what happened? I'm just not reconciled with that moment. And so I don't know how many times Lumumba has featured in projects that I've worked on, again in the last 20 years, 4 or 5 times. So the whole of my Venice British Pavilion piece had one whole section just on Lumumba, again. Partly because he's this silent partner in the project. You know, there are these moments that you make things because you think if you could unravel, if you could make sense of them, you could move on. But I've never been able to. And I can't, because the fact is that, and it's interesting you mentioned the kids, they were invited last year to receive what was left of Patrice. And do you know what's left of him? A tooth. All that's left of Patrice Lumumba is a tooth which the Belgian government presented to the children as an apology for what took place. And the only reason that was left was because the figure who did the deed of disappearance yanked one out and kept it. So in the face of such willful acts of disappearing and disfiguring, yeah, it's not surprising I'm not reconciled. But in a way, that's emblematic of so much that we cover, don't you think? That so much that we cover, we meet at this gate or crossroads where you encounter a will to make things go away, literally to make them disappear. So part of your project is always this project of recovery. You know, I'm not sure we necessarily succeed in that, but the act of narrative recovery of things becomes part and parcel of this memorial project or this project of memory, you know. And almost all the projects I admire have that in them, have that as part of them, whether it's Raoul's, both the documentary and the fiction on Lumumba, or many other things, including what I've just watched. You know, you always feel this sense that someone who you admire is on the same journey as you, in a way, and that journey involves trying to exhume, you know, the ghosts, as it were.
I think maybe there's we share this, maybe, but probably it's inexhaustible because so many are unknown, forgotten, or unattended to. Lumumba, because he's a figure that probably for you and for many in the world is unresolved, so it keeps coming up. It's not resolved. And it seems central to the memory of a lot of people of that time. You know, where were you? What were you doing? What did you do? This kind of thing. And the response of figures in the world, Che Guevara's speech in the UN after the murder of Lumumba is powerful, ongoing. You now with this internet thing, you can see it over and over, this kind of thing. But I think maybe it's, I don't know. I know in my own case, I remember, for instance, okay, the one film maybe that sort of started this with me was there's a poet from the 1950s, a beat poet, and he was very well known in the first 4 or 5 years of his life as a poet and as a figure in Bohemian North Beach of San Francisco, where all this beatnik thing started. His name was Bob Kaufman, and I made a movie about him in 2015. And I made the movie, why did I make the movie? Because I learned about him and maybe 1986, because I was in San Francisco and I read an article in a poetry journal that he had died. And in San Francisco, he was a kind of beloved figure among literary people in this thing. And I read it and I thought, oh, I should make a little movie tribute to him, but I couldn't do it. I wasn't wise enough. I didn't understand how to do it. So then 20 years later or something, I thought I should do this. So then I started to research in this thing. And also, not a lot was known about him, because when he was a young man, he became a sailor when he was maybe 17 years old. His mother had to sign, I've seen the records, right? In the midst of World War II, he became a merchant marine. The merchant marine was one of the most dangerous occupations you could have during the Second World War, because the U-boats that were coming to aid our ally here in England was the U-boats, the German had the U-boats, the submarines, and they would just wait off the coast of New York, and because they didn't do blackouts, the lights from the city of New York would illuminate the U-boats, and the submarines would just pick them off, you know? So it was very dangerous. A lot of them died in this thing, but he was there, 17-year-old, and he was in that, and then he was a trade unionist, huh? He was a young, radical one, and he joined the trade union, National Maritime Union, and the vice president of that union was a man from Jamaica. And it was a radical trade union. Before, in the trade union, it was in the Seamen's Union, it was a matter of you go to the hall, the corrupt guy, choose the friends, this thing, and you don't choose, and you don't compete for jobs. And then this trade union, we put all the jobs in a hat. The number that comes up, I don't care if you're black, blue, green, whatever, it's your job. So they integrated the sailing union. And so I learned he was a part of all that thing before he went to San Francisco, before he showed up in San Francisco to
As a
be a
beatnik.
bohemian and this thing. He had been a militant trade unionist in New York and this thing. He had navigated the globe 9 times. He had been in 3-4 shipwrecks, lost his hearing, got hypothermia, going to Greenland, which now people want to get for the United States. But taking materials to the ally, the Soviet Union, this thing. So I thought, this is an interesting guy. People should know about it. So I decided to make a movie about him. And yeah, because I thought he's an interesting person. And also I can be sure in the United States that figures like this will be overlooked except by a few fanatics. So you could do this the rest of your life, finding people that have been neglected and overlooked and forgotten and that kind of thing. So I did that thing. In the next case, when I made Mario, it was not because of this kind of thing. It was, I happened to be in Portugal, and I thought, if I'm living in this country, what could I do that could be interesting and useful? Because I know it's going to take me forever. So I need to be in love with it, and I need to be dedicated, and it's going to take me time, and it's going to be hard to get the money and all the thing. So I remembered Mario from an article I had read in an article translated in Havana in 1972 about culture and national liberation, and I found him interesting, and I knew something about his complex story. Not as much as I learned, but I thought, yeah, that would be interesting. And I convinced the young people I was working with that it was interesting, and they fell in love with him, and so we dug and dug and dug, and we managed to make the movie about him. And now, happily, there are quite a few people, quite a few compatriots and people who are still alive, and also young ones who never knew the story of him and what the desire, intention, and efforts of the generation who formed the national liberation movements in the former Portuguese colonies. What was their intention? What were the difficulties? Why did they succeed or not succeed or whatever? But what did they intend for you? And what they intended is not necessarily what you got, okay? But it's a reference that you can consult, consider, and decide what is of value to you. And I find them open to that. I find them curious about this, and I'm happy to meet and connect with them and to return this to them for their consideration. And they are open to that. Because one friend who's very intelligent, knowledgeable, and creative person, and not a child, says, oh, I didn't realize that Marcelino dos Santos was all of this. Because by the time she arrives, Marcelino dos Santos is an older man, and he's part of the story of Frelimo, and he's a figure. But in fact, he started someplace, and he helped to create this. And the same in Angola, because the story of in the history that's told is not necessarily complete. Let's just say that. So some people disappear, they're not relevant, and for a long time he was persona non grata, and you didn't show photos and you didn't talk about that. So and I wasn't doing it to provoke anybody or do anything like that. It was just that, okay, it's useful, it's beautiful, it's interesting, and I will try to share this with people. And I'm fortunate that I had the opportunity to do it. The other thing is, in Portugal, the people in Portugal, the bit of film you saw, the story from Africa, and with Mario, I know I want to say this because sometimes we assume that, oh, the Europeans are not interested about what happened in colonialism, blah, 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 this kind of thing. And I'm sorry, but it's not true. Many of them say, we didn't learn this in school. I say, well, we didn't learn this in school either. Okay, so don't feel ashamed. And now, they know, they appreciate, they respond, they have questions, but I find a lot of people are appreciative of the fact of encountering these figures that they didn't know about, and that now they can learn about, they can find for themselves and this kind of thing. And that's maybe a helpful thing in the end. We're not forbidding people to know about this or to have an opinion or whatever. And I have to say, yes, this movie, they asked, oh, the problem was the French school said, can we show this to our students? And the producer says, oh, but they don't want to pay and they're rich, you know. I mean, let them see, you know, and give it to the public schools for free or whatever. I don't have a problem with that. But they want to see. So let them see.
As you were talking, I was thinking, and I wanted to say this earlier, but I'll say it now anyway, about the figures who kind of haunt us, who at some point we end up doing something on. And I have one that I haven't done something on, but I think I will, because actually the thing we're not mentioning in this conversation, the unseen guest in this conversation, is to do with race and the way race functions in our upbringing, if you will. Mm-hmm. And the figure who got me to see that after the fact, actually, started working on me when I was 6 years old. I think we were still in Ghana, so this is before the coup. I know it was before 63 or in 63, because the person I'm talking about dies in 63 on the eve of the March on Washington.
Yes.
And he lived around the corner from us in Accra. And, every time I was taken somewhere, I'd see him, an old white guy sitting in his three-piece suit on the veranda. And I even waved to him once. I don't think he saw me, so he didn't respond. And years later, we were in this country, and I said to my mum, who was that white guy who lived around the corner from us? She kind of looked at me and smiled and said, that was no white guy. And you know who it was? W.E.B. Du Bois.
Yes.
And I think the shock of the realization was what catapulted me into understanding race. Because in my head, he was this white guy. I had no idea about and so I'm like, oh, okay, so there is, I must have been, she told me this when I was like 14, 15, so it's not like me now, I'm talking about me making that realization back then.
Yeah.
But it did kind of bring forcefully home to me the complexity around race.
Yes.
And in a way, it's that complexity that is subdued by the cinema that we've both admired, tried to unearth. That cinema which says, no, there is complexity.
Yes.
Look at that image, that pan across those faces. That pan is a process of individuation, because every single one of these figures has a reason for being there, which is not the one you're imposing on them. African prisoners or black people. There's a kind of complexity, and is one of the reasons why I've loved the cinema that birthed us so much. By that cinema, I mean African cinema. Because it's almost made it its mission, by default, to bring that understanding to to our attention. Yeah, everything we do, almost by default, like the two things you showed us, always stresses this fact. And I wondered if you had any thoughts about that, about the question of race and the role it plays in our cinema and so on.
I think the idea, the topic, African cinema and liberation, I was thinking not to be too clever, but in fact, African cinema and liberation, it liberated us. I mean, it gave us reason, right? And it also, along with what it did, you know, in Africa and among African people, and it liberated a lot of us outside. And we're, you know, I like the clever kids in Lisbon. I'm not thinking of their name now, but they always say, they had this song and they say, not all of us were born in Africa, but Africa was born in us. Do you know? And I think, I'll look them up later. But anyway, I think, yeah, it makes it more complex. If you think, for instance, Hyenas by Jibril Diop Mambete, you think African society is simple? You think it's... The other thing is the complexity. I think is maybe it's something it bequeaths to us, and also maybe it's something that we try to realize and engage with, to remind and to restore the complexity, to suggest the complexity, that it's not simple. The story, in fact, in this little film about this story from Africa, the next section, what happens is a figure is crossing the river and he's shot. And the Portuguese receive him, they rescue him, they receive him, they treat him, and in fact, he becomes a guide. Now, the reason he was shot and the reason he was in the river is that he had defied the Soba, one of the Sobas, and he was in a conflict because he assumed that it was his rightful place to inherit the position of the Soba among his group, and the Soba was not indulging that. So he told him to go away, he shot him, the Portuguese receive him. He then becomes the lead scout for the Portuguese, right? And they suggest to him that once the issue is resolved, he will be restored to his rightful place as the Soba. They succeed in the battle, they subdue and get the agreement and that of the people apparently, and they propose him as Soba. The people refuse because they don't think he's the one that should be selected. They select another one. He then shoots himself, and his nephew finds him. And you think, what a complicated story, because we have a figure, is a tragic figure, because he has the capacity, he's capable in this thing, but circumstances and the dimensions of the problem means it's not possible. And now he has to live with, did I betray them? Did I, you know? So he decides to shoot himself. And I was interesting, I will, please indulge me. I was on a Zoom call with people at the University of Florida, and the professor was there and the students, and showed the movie, and then they react to the movie and we have a discussion. And a scholar from Zimbabwe, but was working in South Africa, she said, well, if what this film says, because the professor was too complimentary, oh, this film is so moving and this thing, and she knows a lot about Africa. And so this one, who I guess studied with her or something, said, wrote in the chat, if this film is correct, then my whole dissertation is invalid, page 131, right? So I said, okay. Trauma surgery being what it was, in southern Africa in 1907. You shoot yourself in the mouth with a rifle, the likelihood of your survival is what? So then I called the producer and I said, Rui, you need to go back and read the passage. Did the guy die? So he says, well, the surgeon hoped he could save him because they liked the guy, hoped he could save him. I said, okay, if we found that he saved him, we removed the line that says he died on the operating table. And I said to the lady, let's discuss. She didn't want to discuss. I never heard another word from her. that happens, right? But I'm saying the complexity of the character is what I'm trying to get at. To say that it's, so what do? Do you not, we can say he's a traitor, we can say whatever, but he had motive and he made a decision of what he would do in this complex situation. And it didn't turn out the way that he supposed, and he becomes a tragic figure. But he allowed me to have something to tell, because I'm wondering, okay, the photographs are made from the point of view of a military photographer, okay, assigned to the Portuguese army. That's the view. That's what it shows. But I don't have a way to articulate what the Africans, subjects of this photograph felt. And this figure gave me a way to
Get into it.
and I have then at least three variants of what was taking place. Anyway, sorry.
Well done. We got that. Listen, I'm told that we only have 5 minutes, sadly.
Really?
Yeah. And so we're going to shut up. And just in case you have something you might want to say or a question.
That's a shame. Yeah. Any questions? We can stay more than 5 minutes for you. Oh, we're done.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I can stop. Believe it or not.
No, you were good.
Please say something. Some of you are really wise people. I know you from before. I know your reputation.
Indeed. Peter.
Hi, Billy. Great to see you together, both talking. It's wonderful being here. But you said something shortly, a little while back, Billy, that you were liberated by African cinema. Can you tell us a little more about that, what it was, and how was that process impacting upon the work you were doing?
Oh, probably. It's very simple. When I started to think about films as something that people actually did, I met a guy. He was Brazilian. So, and also I first encountered the movies that mattered to me as a young adult. I saw Cuban documentary films about literacy campaign, about cutting cane and this thing. And I was convinced, that's really interesting. I didn't know you could do that, right? Then I fell in love with this Brazilian cinema novo and this thing. And why? Because it's all of that part of the thing is called the New World, right? And it shares a lot of things in common. There's virtually no country in that part of the hemisphere that didn't receive African slaves during the time of the development of those places. Okay, so they share many features in common. Also, they were places where the settlement was quite violent because they met already people in those places and they needed to subdue and take the possession of the place and establish themselves in that thing. So they share that. So you have in Cuba a lot of Afro-Cubans. You have in Brazil a lot of Afro-Brazilians. In United States, you have a lot of what's called now African Americans, right, who share some similar features of their experience. And so they seem familiar. You don't speak their language. They kind of move and look like you, but it's not the same thing. So, but then what you notice in Brazilian cinema, for instance, you have this figure in Cinema Nova. His name is Antonio Batanga. If you know Barrivento, if you know Glauber's film, there's this black guy who's all over the place, taking up a lot of space and making a lot of demands on the thing, and nobody forbids him. There's nothing like that in American cinema at the time. Huh? It's different. So then that makes you curious. Then African cinema shows up. Our cinema is a school for our people. This is what I read in Cineast magazine from Usman Sembène. And then, so what happens is now you have another frame of reference. I was not so enamored, knocked out, or in love with American cinema. I learned to get an education and be more respectful and accept and learn with American cinema. I learned, in fact, through the fact that Nelson Piedra dos Santos loved John Ford. Better take a look, right? Yeah, that one likes Chaplin. Maybe we better consider, right? So gradually, I come to accept, know, value, and love some American cinema. But it was a relief to have the reference and not be enamored, jealous, envious, any of that, of New Hollywood, of any of that, and also not knocked out about it. Because on any given day, the young one, brilliant young critic in Portugal, oh my God, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Find a single black person in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and I will buy you lunch. And I wasn't even looking for that or thinking of it, but it occurred to me the other day. He hates hippies and this kind of thing, and only if that had happened, this kind of compensation where if the cowboy movie star had really killed the Manson gang, it wouldn't have turned out that way. Well, he did the same thing with Nazis in Berlin. I mean, I don't know how you feel about the guy, but to me, that's silly. And I was never that crazy about, I'm not that in love with that. They need to show me something. I'm not knocked out by Scorsese. Okay, he sponsors some African films and that thing. Great. But hey, I don't bow down to that. And I prefer others. I prefer, what's the old man, Ridwick Gatak. It's more interesting cinema for me. Just emotionally, your subjective stuff. So it freed me from having to obsess with that, to realize it wasn't that big. And I prefer the Italian cinema. It's more close to human beings, more close to the people that I'm interested in. I prefer Renoir, and not like my brother Charlie, Southerner by Renoir. Hell with that. I prefer Tony.
Okay.
I'm getting rude. I should stop.
Yes. We share.
John, do you have any reflections?
Yeah, can I see if there's any other questions? If not, I will certainly answer that. But I feel like we've
We
spoken.
had a drink about that. I'm sorry, you provoked me.
Okay. Whilst you'll think, there.
First of all, thank you so much just for sharing. It's a real honor to get to hear both of you. My question is actually very simple. So I'm a young researcher. I just turned 33, and I'm already quite exhausted when it comes to working with the archive. I think specifically to do with access. So sort of on that note, because I'm a filmmaker as well, and I work specifically with African Archive. And my question, I guess, is what has kept you going? Number one, and two-parter, any advice? Any advice on how to stay hopeful?
Prévu, monsieur.
No. I think what keeps you going, you're not tired, you're gonna keep going. The thing is, I hope that this question of access to the archives can something can come from the advocacy and the work that people like June and others are doing to try to have this recognized, and also for there to be greater access for younger filmmakers and that to have access to archival material, because it's quite expensive, prohibitive, and limiting. And I know some archivists, but then they retire, right? Like the guy, Zé Manuel Costa in Cinemateca Portuguese. He was always advocating, and he's connected to the archives in Angola and Mozambique and other places, that we allow young filmmakers to have access to this material to see what they can do with it. It was a campaign and something he was always doing. So I hope others can take it up and they can become more sensitized to this. And even the commercial ones can be reminded that this material is a heritage that belongs beyond more than to them, and that we should give access for that. And hopefully, even in funding, it can be recognized the value and the need for this, and funding can go specifically to help new filmmakers and younger filmmakers to have access and have the capacity to work with the archive. We should advocate for that, and yeah, I support it and I agree, because it's quite limiting and prohibitive. The other thing we must realize, we know, many of you know, much of the archival material from the former colonial parts of the world resides in the metropolitan countries or the former colonizing countries, right? And maybe there should be advocacy for the ability to share this material and to have access, and even to train archivists for some of the people who want to do that kind of work, to have the opportunity to train and to do this work and to master it and to be able to have these resources shared. Okay, we can do a lot digitally and this kind of thing, but I hope that's the case. The other thing is there's no shame. I'm thinking, for instance, now we've had some recent success by individual artists, fine artists, in the United States, previously not so well recognized and enumerated and paid in this thing. Now we have some success. Prior to that, a lot of the modern art of the Black American artists resided in the Smithsonian Museum. Why? It's the public museum. Okay? So our treasures were in the public museum. For instance, Romero Bearden spent time in the Bellevue Mental Hospital. There was work created by Romero Bearden that Orderly or somebody found, and they gave it to Smithsonian. Fortunately, it survives and it was cared for and it's there. So there's no shame, and also a lot of the photographs of African Americans exist in the government collections because they weren't personal portraits and that thing. They were things that were made in the process of documenting things about the public during the 30s and this kind of thing, or in the military and this kind of thing, right? And it's great that there is a national archive where you might have access to those things, right? And there's no shame in it. Not everybody had a home movie camera, right? So, and even people are paying more attention and taking care of those things. And they want to have repositories for them to preserve them for people to use. But that's more than you need to know.
I just want to add one thing to Billy's contribution, which is, and this is really important. You must carry on doing what you're doing. I know you're exhausted, but built into the project is your exhaustion. Because one of the insights that the exhaustion is about is this. The way in which we are taught about the coming of the image in the 19th century, especially the cinematic one, is completely wrong. Right? It's about the Lumiere, all of that shite. Okay. When the reality really is this, the reality is that the machinery we call cinema, in part, became what it was in its encounter with the other. So when you go to any museum, any library that keeps images, the vast majority of the images in it are from the elsewhere, from over there. That is the fact. So in fact, there's more films about us, the other, than there is about the here. That is the reality. But you don't get told that. You know what I mean? So in a way, what you're doing is also saving the cinema from its own falsehoods. And that's why you must continue. Yeah? You're not just finding out yourself. You're finding out the spirit of the thing as it became what we now know. Most of it is about you. Yeah? So please continue. I know it's exhausting, but please continue, okay?
Yeah, thank you. That was very interesting. My name is Colin Charles, and my question is, perhaps you two have followed each other's careers over the years and looked at each other's films, and I'm curious to know which film you could talk about that you would admire and say something about.
There was another question, if you don't mind, sir, because it might just be... How long do we have, by the way? 15 minutes. 15, okay. We'll get to you, Colin, I promise.
Hi guys, thank you very much for your insights. It's been fascinating to listen to you both speak. I'm here at the LSE studying international development, and I'm very interested in the way that mediums like cinema and perhaps music and African protest...
The mic's not
too
on,
far?
apparently.
Oh, okay, I see. Could you hear me?
Now I can, yes.
You can? Okay, I hear, sorry, I'm not used to using these. I'm here studying at the LSE, studying international development. And I'm just very interested in the medium of cinema and the medium of music in Africa, an African protest song, and how that can like decolonize our understanding of like the African struggle and I guess like emancipate our consciousness. And like, you talk about it like retelling stories and stories that have been neglected, and or there's a Portuguese military photographer telling that particular story. I just wonder like how important that is to your work, like telling these stories from like the African voice, I suppose. I mean, forgive me if I'm being a bit generic, but.
I'm going to let Colin's question just fuse with everything else, because otherwise it would take us too long. So we'll talk about things we admire about each other as part of a general answer to him, if you don't mind. Yeah. Billy, any response to how music? I mean, you know, like okay, the only quarrel we have, it's not one I've even announced to him, so you're the first to know about it, was in that film. I love the Estonian composer Arvo Pärt. I've used him I don't know how many times. And the only quarrel Billy and I have is about the choice of recording of Fratres to use there. I would have used the ECM one rather than the non-ECM one. But other than that, the Billy was part of a group that we got to know as a group. And it's very difficult to differentiate now because that's how they came to us. It's a group that included Haile Gerima, the Ethiopian-American filmmaker, Charles Bennett, the LA-based filmmaker, Ayoka Chenzira, and of course Billy himself. And that group were called, I mean, euphemistically, the LA Rebellion filmmakers. They began at, as far as I'm aware, in the mid-70s. Billy can correct me if I'm wrong. And one of the things we loved about them was the deployment of the vernacular. Yeah, the everyday as a distinct feature of black cinema. Hadn't seen it before that. And it's now become, it's the territory exploited so well by Spike Lee later, without, some would say, understanding it completely, but that's another question. And in that, the use of music was definitely part of that. Yeah, music played a kind of major role in making you aware that you are now in a different country, different territory. And in that territory, musicality as you knew it wasn't just going to be soundtrack, but one of the raw materials being brought to bear in the storytelling. And I've never forgotten that in any of the films that I saw, whether it's Billy's the first film that we showed here, no, June? In 81, 82, I think. Never forgotten that. I mean, I'm sure he has his own to add to that, but that would be my take.
I think what happened was mid-'80s or so. We started to hear about this group of young black British filmmakers, workshop groups, this thing. And I remember I was at UCLA and my friend, Jeff Gilmore, who became head of Sundance and Tribeca and all that stuff. He was the programmer at the UCLA Film Archive. And I thought, oh, we should, because after Haile graduated and left, Charlie graduated, it was kind of dispersal of the people. And around in Los Angeles, there was not so much happening at the moment. And I thought, oh, Jeff, why don't we make a program of this new black British cinema people who is quite exciting, and it can stimulate my friends, stimulate us to have this encounter with them. And so we made a program and we invited people from the workshops, from various workshops, black workshops. And we had an encounter, and also we invited Horace Ove, and able to have him there and others. And I noticed that one group from the workshop, they were shy to know Horace, you know? Like, what is that about? And then I say, oh, and one of them gave me a book by Carol Phillips. And I say, do you know him? They said, of course I don't know him. But anyway, it was a learning experience and an enriching experience. And I was a bit disappointed with the friends, the younger friends in Los Angeles, because they said things like, oh, that's like the 60s. They're doing like us. I said, no, they're not. There's something different happening. You weren't doing that. You don't know anything theoretically, right? So I've been, aware and that of it for a time, and I follow. And I learn a lot, and a lot of things I love. More recently, in my new life, I have to say I'm going to get paid for this. But the second channel of Portuguese television, the cultural channel is called RTP2. Incredible programming. This woman who programs that station, because 2 years ago, I saw a whole series of documentaries about Black Britain in the 80s. And I learned all this thing about how they used to put your kids in the slow learners classes and community fights against that. I saw all of Small Axe on that. I mean, I was in heaven, right? So I kind of follow and try to understand what's going on. And yeah, and it's always been the case. And I know when John moved to making more work in the fine arts context and museums and this, and I follow, and I saw in the installation in the Ghanaian Pavilion in 2019. I was there. I watched that, the whole thing. I took a seat. The danger with those installations, as you know, is this postmodern people, they pass by. Did you see it? Oh, yeah, I saw. But that meant they spent less than 1 minute. They keep moving, right?
Fine.
But
5
that's
minutes
the
if you got
danger. And then they say, oh, it's time-based, not for them. That's the feature of, some contemporary art. They passed by and they saw it. Did you see it? Oh, yeah, I saw it. Out of the corner of my eye. But, you know, it's important that
No, it is. It is.
you do this work and that you put it in the space. And it's available. There were seats. It's not like you asked them to stand. They could have seen it. But no.
Any other
I don't
questions?
know. To be
Before Billy and I don't do this. I do.
sorry, it's the truth.
Anyone else? Oh, June.
Yes, please. We have to hear.
Hello, hello. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Nice to be here to see you guys. There is a question, but I just wanted to comment on the whole spectrum that you've just been discussing from the 60s coming along. I do have experience of that era, but it was mainly the 80s by the time it started to come through. And John would know, because he mentioned it earlier, that was around the time that we were actually doing quite a lot of things, although mine began slightly earlier. There is so much that was said today and that came through on the screen and in the discussion that relates to what we do at our archive, and a lot of it is in our archive, the J.G. Packer archive, and a couple of our colleagues and people behind that are here in this room. But I mean, so much of it. I worked with Louis Messiah on research for the Du Bois film that he made. I worked with Raoul Peck on his films, especially around Lumumba and other films. And these things, because they were of a certain era, certain time, a lot of the stuff that's in our archive is pre-digital. That's why it was in the archive. And we've been working now with, you also mentioned the importance of young, nurturing and helping young curators to do what they would find, what they see as their role in this time and this era. And it's one of the things that we're doing now, because we're working with 5 cities to train new young curators in Pan-African cinema. We did one in Leeds, we're doing Glasgow shortly, and that will be followed by Cardiff, Bristol and Birmingham. So these things are partly cyclical, but they're also things that we need to do, because we need to actually provide the next generation with the information and the knowledge that we have of the past. And that's why this sort of work is so important, and that's why these discussions are so important. One other thing, John, I wanted to ask you this in particular. When you were discussing and presenting the guy sitting like, looking like this. It reminded me of a comment that you made, and I remember the film, the image. I don't remember the name of the film, but I remember the image because it's a woman, an African woman, in her African attire, but just a headshot, and she's looking straight out of the screen like this, and she's holding. You've never seen that, you were saying. You've never seen anyone else doing that thing, but she's doing it. And you, John, had said at the time, but that woman is saying, but look at this fool boy, them. Remember, do you remember it? You make that comment about her and her, look at these fool boy, them. Who they think they're talking to, or who they think they're looking at. And I've been trying to remember the title of the film. I don't know if you can remember it, yes, but it was a comment that you made, and I was thinking, yeah, there has been, like with the guys in the film that you mentioned, Billy, but there have been other occasions, and also definitely women who are not actually saying anything, but their non-verbal presentation was really quite significant in many ways. So I don't know if you remember that, John.
I remember it very well. I mean, it's a short film I made called Peripetia, and it was about two images, two drawings from the 16th century. And at the end of the film, I use one of the images from the Congo that I love so much. Yeah, there are two women, but actually you see one much more because she has a posture that I've grown to admire so much. So she's leaning back. You think she's doing it, but she's not. She's leaning back and she's just looking sideways at the camera with this wry smile on her face. And it's the first time I became aware of that promise that I talked about earlier, the promise of the image. Because it's almost as if she's looking at and through the equipment to me. And I thought, how is this possible? And then you slowly think, oh, okay, it's possible because the imminent quality of the image is built on this promise that it will encounter, be in my presence one day. And that I would see this. Because why else would you take a picture? If not to show it, if not to have it at some point in the future. So she appears to have that, but she's actually just leaning on her shoulder, looking as I'm looking at you now. You know, the image that I talked about, where the figure says, "Look at this fool," is actually another image from another film, and that was from the Nine Muses. Yeah, and that's what reminded me and keeps reminding me about the secrecy of the image, because it's a film made in '62, and it's about the coming of, African Caribbean people to this country. Yeah, there are two men sitting very sharply dressed, and they are in a film that they've consented to, but not for the reasons the film says. The film says, these are migrant problems coming over, right? But they are dressed for something else. They're dressed for something more utopian, something that was, yes, yeah, I'm coming here, and this is going to work. We're going to work. I'll love you, you love me, and we'll live happily ever after. Of course, he doesn't know. At least I thought that he doesn't know. But he did, even then, because if you read his lips, as they took this picture of him, he does say, "Look at that foolish man." Look upon him. He says, "Look upon him." Right? And you think, oh yeah. So the image is not so innocent. It's not just waiting, incubating for me. it also has its own ambitions there and then. You know? Sorry, I'm going to stop now.
Yeah. I'm not sure if I can phrase
Holly,
this
sorry.
question easily, but I'm interested in the whole idea of translations. And I'd quite like to know a bit more from Billy about how he first encountered your work, what he saw of it. In 1983, I was in Cuba when there was the African exchange with Gaston Cabaret, etc. And one of the big discussions was whether or not the image of the African cinema that was then the canon and was being brought over, including Suleiman and Osman, would translate, and vice versa, and how that was going to happen. And actually, I was working with something called Bandung File when Handsworth's Songs came out, and I'll never forget the day after the broadcast of Handsworth's Songs, and there was one hell of a row in there. And this was with, we were already split anyway, because there was Tariq on the Asian side, and there was Dargus Howe on the Caribbean side. And then there was Salman Rushdie weighing in the distance. But it was about, what are these, you know, who do these kids think they are? And who are they speaking to? And are they coming out of this kind of really rarefied modernist filmmakers world and then telling us, trying to tell us how to tell stories? And they were caught in their own elitism anyway. But it was complicated. And it was one of the, that sort of whole era was, where is the language here? Whose is it? How specific is it to the moment, to where we are? And since you described, somebody described your world, your first world, I think it was John, as more vernacular. It's kind of completely different language. But everyone's trying to understand these multiple kind of ways of being.
Shall I say something very briefly?
Yes, please.
More and more, this business of translation you talk about has become a kind of memory from that period. Because I remember not just that Salman Rushdie affair here, but going to Cuba in '87 with Handsworth Songs. And they wouldn't show it. I couldn't work out why they wouldn't show it. I mean, because Titon Alea, Thomas Guterres Alea had come here, we'd met, he'd heard about the film, he said, bring it over. I took it over, and so we sat there for days, me and Pervez Khan in '87, waiting for them to show this film. And in the end, I stormed into Ikaik and confronted Pastor. Look, if you don't want to show the film, that's fine. Give it back, and I'll go home. And I suddenly realized that we had, in his response, that we had walked into a kind of minefield in that country that I hadn't really anticipated. And it's a minefield in which race circulated in a very different way to here. But they were aware that I was invoking that circulation of race from elsewhere in a way that might be, quote unquote, troublesome. And so they were caught in a bind. You know, they didn't want to censor the film, but they also didn't want to show it either. And in the end, finally, they allowed me to show it and invite some people who by then I'd met. So yeah, the projects were always, the films were always imperiled on this raft of translation. And you were aware of it from the get-go. I don't know what Billy feels about it, but certainly that was my experience of showing any of the films. One more question. One more question, okay. Sorry,
hi, thanks for having this conversation. I was really inspired by it and seeing the pieces. The first piece, in particular, Billy, the decision you had to sort of show, to individuate the characters, the people in the image, and then to show it again in wide. Was there anything that you had seen? Because I'm thinking about the use of archive and how sometimes when I see it, I'm left wondering, okay, what is the person's intention here? And have the people in the image been almost manipulated? And so I'm just wondering if there was something that you had seen that had inspired you to actually deconstruct the image in the way that you did.
I'm not exactly sure, but I thought, okay, in a way, it's a way of seeing it more closely, of engaging with it in a way where you're kind of searching for what is there, but because you're moving and that reads a certain way. But it was to study it, to look at the guys with the guns equally. Maybe we don't succeed in doing that. But it was to see that, also to reveal. It starts, you want to reveal something. If I show you the whole image in the beginning, I do something else. But if I explore within it, I do something else. So I think it was that, not to put too much on it. And I'm only being quiet because I don't want to keep us here.
Billy, can't thank you enough, man.
Thank you.
Billy Woodberry. Well, at this point, I'll just say thank you so much, John. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, John. Thank you, Billy. And thank you all for coming. What a wonderful afternoon. Thank you so much for being so generous.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'm so sorry we're running out of time. We started late, but thank you so much. Thank you for coming. Those who might want to see a film, there's a film coming on. I'm being probed by the team called The Ants. Nothing to do with this conversation, but it's part of Film Africa. Been kind of like struggling to figure out where to put films within the program. And I do hope that tomorrow is the last day. I'm so grateful I can go to sleep. And then we have a film called Katanga, which is a UK premiere. We have a UK premiere, and it's also the Yenega. It's Africa's biggest prize you can get from Burkina Faso, FESPACO, exactly. So we are screening it tomorrow, and I don't know if we got some tickets left, but find out. But maybe we might have some guest lists. I'm sure that some of you were interested in Katanga. It's screening at the BFI tomorrow at 6 o'clock. It's a closing film. And thank you for coming. And I do hope that you support us for the next edition. The next edition I start planning in January. After this, January we start again. And thank you so much for everyone for coming. And thank you for John.
Do a long press. Yeah, it's just a long one. You've done it.